A chemical formula is very much like a recipe. If you grab a recipe book, it tells you what ingredients you need and how much of each ingredient. A chemical formula does the same thing. It just tells us what elements are in the compound and how many atoms the compound contains. Now, those tiny little numbers that you see at the bottom, for example, H2O, the 2 has a special name, and we call that a subscript. The subscript is the small number that's placed to the right of the element. Its job is to tell you how many atoms there are in the compound. Take a look at this example. The 2 is the subscript. The 2 tells us how many H's. We know that H stands for hydrogen, so there are 2 hydrogen atoms. O stands for oxygen, and you'll notice there's no number after that. But we do see one O, so we know that there's one. So we know there's one oxygen atom. Let's try some examples, okay? The very first one, if we look at sand, we know that sand is a chemical formula, okay? Sand is a compound, SiO2. Because the I is lowercase, we know it goes with the S. So Si stands for silicon. There is no subscript after it, which means that we only see one of the Si. That tells us there's one atom of silicon. Look at the O. We see the subscript 2, which tells us there are 2 atoms of oxygen. And there you have it, just that simple. Let's try another. Water. You should know the compound for water, and the chemical formula for that is H2O. 2 we call the subscript. This is telling us that there are 2 atoms of the H. We know H stands for hydrogen, so there's 2 atoms of hydrogen. O stands for oxygen. We don't see a number here, but we see one O. So that just tells us that there's one atom of oxygen. Okay, I believe this is our last example. Salt. Na, because the A is lowercase, we know it sticks with the N. Na is sodium. Cl, the L is lowercase, goes with the C. Cl is chlorine. There are no subscripts here, so we know that there is one atom of sodium and that there's one atom of chlorine. Okay, at this point, let's take a look and try some examples. You're going to guess, is it an element or a compound? Now, if we think back, a compound is 2 elements that chemically combine to form a new substance. Okay, so here we have methane. This is actually what the picture of methane would look like. You'll learn more about this in high school. Methane is CH4. C is carbon, H is hydrogen. We know that because there are 2 elements chemically combined, it's going to be a compound. Let's take a look at this one. Sulfur, S8. That means there are 8 elements of sulfur. I'm sorry, not 8 elements, 8 atoms of sulfur. But if you look here, the big difference is there's only one element of sulfur. Here we have 2 elements. We have carbon and hydrogen. So is this an element or a compound? Even though there are 8 atoms, there is still only one element. So it is an element. Hydrogen peroxide. Compound. Sulfuric acid, H2SO4. Take a second to think about your answer. You're correct, compound. Oxygen. This is actually ozone. The ozone molecule is O3. It's a little bit tricky, but yes, it's an element because the only element we have is oxygen. Even though there's 3 of them, there are still only 3 oxygen molecules. Nitrous oxide. This is the laughing gas that the dentist uses. Yes, it's a compound. We have nitrogen and oxygen chemically combined. Okay, the next part you're going to be doing, let's take a look at where we are in our paper. You may need to pause this you're going to be using Exploration 2. You'll need to go to Google Classroom to click into Exploration 2. And what you're going to be doing is filling out this chart here. So here we go. Let's take a look at this together. Okay, it's coming. Here we go. Great. So you should be at the place as well that says molecules and compounds. Again, it's very important to read everything, okay? So let's take a look at the introduction together. What do you get when you combine highly corrosive sodium with poisonous chlorine gas? It's something that you eat every day with no ill effects. This exploration has you pair combinations of elements with the compounds that are formed from them. The results are often quite surprising. Let's hit continue. If you look over here, you see some common compounds that we use every day. Match these combinations of elements with the common compounds. This is the really, really important part here. It says roll the mouse over the element combinations for a hint. Let's do the first one together. So you'll notice if you do this here and roll over, you'll see that this picture is sodium and chlorine, and it's used to season food. Well, I know if I put this over here, I think that we're talking about salt, so I'm going to drag it over, and you'll see that I'm correct. Again, it's really important to take the time to stop and read this because there's a lot of good information in here. Okay, so we know salt uses the chemical formula NaCl. Sodium, Na, is a highly corrosive metal that is so reactive it's only found in nature in compounds. Chlorine, Cl2, is a highly poisonous gas. But together these two elements form the compound sodium chloride, NaCl, or common table salt. So what you're going to do is you're going to come back to your paper, and right here, you're going to write the chemical formula. Capital N, lowercase a, capital C, but maybe I can do this there. Oh, look at that. Capital N, lowercase a, capital C, L. And we know that there's 2 is the subscript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to format subscript 2. Whoops, superscript. We want the subscript. Format subscript 2, NaCl2. And then you're going to go ahead and explain this chemical formula. So this tells us that there's 1 atom of sodium and there are 2 atoms of chlorine. Okay, so at this point, you're on your own to match up the rest of them and complete this section here, okay? When you're finished, raise your hand, ask Mrs. Tuckash to come over, check it, make sure you're on the right track before you continue. This next part, once you've gotten permission, you're going to do just as we did in our last examples, element or compound. So here you will have several different either elements or compounds. You're going to write the symbol of the elements that make up the element or compound and the number of atoms. So let's take a look at the first one together, MgS. We know Mg stands for magnesium, S stands for sulfur. So that is a compound. So right here, you would write the word compound. And then on the next part, you would write just like this, follow this formula, okay? Blank atoms of magnesium. So there's 1 atom of magnesium, comma, 1 atom of sulfur. When you finish this, raise your hand. When you get to number 8, have Mrs. Tuckash check it, and you are going to be in good shape. Great job today.